Hello and welcome to my presentation on Greek architecture. My name is Amber Peters and this is created for History 101 FO3X of fall of 2021, taught by Professor Maniatis. Let's get started. So a quick overview here. I'm going to be talking about the development of Greek architecture and how the building became evolutionized from wood to stone in the three orders. Then I will be talking about the inspiration for their construction, why they built the temples and the shrines, and then some of their big projects like the Knossos, the Parthenon, the Acropolis, and the Rextheon. Those are a few examples. I will then talk about Greek theater and how they weren't just known for the pillars that we see today. And finally, I will finish with the importance of Greek architecture today. So first we have the development of Greek architecture. The Minoans, they were the first Greek-speaking civilization located on an island of Crete, circled on the map there for you, and right above it, that is Greece and the Aegean Sea. And they created complex palace centers and worshipped at small shrines within the center that had its name Palace Center. And because of that, there's a lack of temples, because they did all their worshipping in the Palace Center. The Knossos, that's the most impressive and largest of the palace centers, and it was created on the northern coast of Crete. And then over on the Greek mainland we have the Mycenaeans, and they built palaces that were smaller, more fortress-like, as opposed to the maze-like palace centers of the Minoans. And some boulders that were used, fun fact here, they were so big that the classical Greeks in the classical period thought that they were built by the Cyclops, which inspired some Greek myths. And then the Dark Age occurred, Greek architecture disappeared, not much is known of that. And then the Archaic Age, we have architecture re-emerging with the transition into stone. So the first temples, they were like small and simple, and none survived due to the material that was used, which was actually wood. And so they had thatched roofs. What happened was they had thatched roofs, but then they began using heavy pottery roofing tiles, but soon realized that the wooded columns needed to be stronger, so by the end of the 600s, almost everywhere in Greece was using stone. And then a form of building began to get standardized. It was a rectangle with rows of columns, a front and back porch, and low-pitched triangle roof. And this was called the colonnade, and the first temple with this was dedicated to Hera and located on the Aegean island, and actually had 43 wooden columns. So that was before it was transformed into stone. But it's pretty impressive. And then how they got the stone is even more impressive. So they chiseled away blocks of stone from a mountain and inserted wooden wedges and saturated them with water to expand the wood, making the stone crack. Then they used crowbars to finish freeing the stone, and then large wagons and oxen to transport the stone to the worksite. And then they had stonemasons preparing them for their pre-measured spuds. Everything was pre-measured, pre-planned, and very precise in this. And something really cool about this is that they didn't use any mortar. The stones fit tightly, and they were joined with eye-shaped iron clamps. And depending on the building, a single column could weigh between 60 to 120 tons and could stand up to 3 stories tall. Pretty impressive. And then they actually had to use pulleys to get the stones up into the air, and then raw muscle power to get them into the exact fit. It's kind of impressive to think about, considering how we have machines to do all of our work today, and we can't even think of doing that work ourselves, like by hand, with animals. So, another thing in the Archaic Age, we have the Doric and Ionic orders that came about. I'll talk about them in the next slide, but they were basically a building style of the columns. And then in the Classical period, we have the Corinthian order that came later. So like I said, the building became evolutionized. They went from wood to stone, and now the orders. We have the Doric order is located mainly on the Greek mainland, and that word right there, that's pronounced frieze, and it was actually very unique. The Doric frieze was made out of separate panels, and when I say frieze, I'm talking about, let's pretend this is a temple here. We've got the columns, pretend they're all the same, and then we've got the panels up here, it's a bunch of rectangles, and the Doric frieze is actually separate rectangles along here, if you could follow my cursor there. Is separate panels, and that's unique because the Ionic order has a continuous, just long panel. So that's what made that unique, and how this is just a column with the plain slab on top. That was iconic of the Doric order. And then the Ionic order had, like I said, the continuous panel for the frieze, and located on the Aegean Islands in the Western Asia Minor. And it actually has a decorative base down here. So as opposed to the Doric order, which is plain, it just meets the ground, this has a base and the iconic two swirls at the top. The Corinthian order, again on the Greek mainland, is later in the classical period. It's based on acanthus leaves drawn by Callimachus. He drew acanthus leaves surrounding a basket, and they actually decided to make that officially one of their orders, which is pretty cool. And these orders, they're both for the aesthetic and like well-proportioned looks. They were very precise and proportioned about everything they did, and I will talk about that more later. So they soon found something out. If they created straight lines on each side of the pillar, when someone would stand back and look at a temple, it would actually look like the bottom was smaller than the top. It's like illusion that got created. So what they did was they made the bottom a little bit wider than the top. And then, so when you stand back and look at it, they look pretty straight, but it still concaves inward. And then another thing is that this actually isn't a straight line. It's a curve, because it concaves. They created that curve to make it look straight. It's just another illusion that the Greeks were so precise with their building and their sculpting of the columns, it actually made the building look taller. They noticed that too, and it's crazy how precise that they were. Another cool thing about the temples is that they were actually painted with colors such as like red, blue, green, gold. They were all painted, but the paint faded away long ago. So it's sad that we can't see that anymore, and there's not much left to show. But on Knossos, there is paint left on there that was reconstructed, and I'll show you that in a bit. Little pop quiz here. Let's see if you guys can guess which ones are which orders. Hopefully you get them right. We've got the Doric order over here, as you can see. Sorry for the picture quality. It's got the slab up top, and that just meets the bottom. Next we have the Corinthian order. We've got the acanthus leaves right here. Very pretty. I believe this is the Temple of Zeus. The Olympia Zeus. And then we have the Ionic order. You can see the spirals up here, and then the decorative base. Next up we have Pericles. He was the Greek statesman. He led Athens to the Golden Age, and sorry, my bad, my mic got cut out there for a minute. So he led Athens to Golden Age, and he helped to create the building program for the Acropolis. He actually oversaw the Acropolis himself, and he actually said that the Acropolis was going to be served as propaganda, and he said, his words, that it was going to be a showcase to all outsiders of Athenian imperial greatness. And he knew this and knew it would last a long time, which is why he wanted to help build it. He was one of the Greek architectures, and he is best remembered for his wide-ranging program of public building, and he commissioned numerous sacred public buildings. So the Parthenon was not the only one, but it was the major one. And this is Pericles here. Now, the inspiration for construction. We have a quote from Pericles. I'll read it to you. You should fix your eyes every day on the greatness of Athens as she really is, and you should fall in love with her. When you realize her greatness, then reflect that what made her great was men with a spirit of adventure. So that's a really nice quote. It shows how he felt about the different buildings and the different buildings of the Greeks and how it just made them feel. He is very passionate about it. Which brings me to one of their inspirations, which is pride. It shows what they stand for, basically. But another thing is religion. It provided the gods, according to them, it provided the gods with their own house to keep them close by. That's something that they believed in. They believed that the gods would sometimes come down and live there, and if they had a house, they'd stay more often to protect them. Another thing, as explained in the last slide, propaganda and to show wealth. This was a statue once located in a temple. I believe it's now in a museum and reconstructed. This is to show like how wealthy they were. This is gold. It's just amazing. And then something to also support the religion aspect of this is that the Parthenon frieze, the rectangles on top of the columns, it depicts like heroic scenes from Greeks past and like contests between gods and mythical figures, and also honored the goddess Athena. They had multiple temples for different gods, such as the temple of the Olympic Zeus, and I know there are a few more, but they left my head for a moment. So we have some big projects by them, and this image is actually stolen from the game Old World, and it just shows how famous Greek project, like the Greek buildings, have become. It from way back in the BC era to now, like we still think about them and include them in our games today. It's crazy. So, as you know, many Greek buildings have become famous, and like we just see them in video games now, and it's awesome. It's good to keep learning about our past. So right here we have big projects. The number one being Gnosis, and it's number one because it is one of the oldest, but it's still standing and reconstructed. So it is built by the Minoans, of course. As I talked about before, it's made of stone masonry, rubble, plaster, and wood. We have a picture of it down here, actually. This was the entire thing. I have a better picture that I'll show you in a minute. You can see these are the little columns, and this is like columns. So by comparing those two pictures, it was very big. It had corridors, ramps, and raised walkways. It was an architectural maze. And it's crazy how they built that with the amount of stuff that they had to build it back in the day. However, sadly, it was destroyed by an earthquake, and construction today to try and like rebuild it has actually affected the ruins, and it's kind of sad. Here, let me pull up a video. Oh my gosh. Alright, well, I don't know why I can't access that. I should be able to. But, if you search up, Gnosis and so I'm trying to think of it. The remaking of Gnosis. If you search that up, the first video that'll pop up, it will show, like, it'll go through the whole entire thing. And it's going to show, I believe it is right here. Right here. But, that is this part. And it is just crazy how big it was. These are the actual plans for it, and just to show how much of a maze it was. This was the central court. That is the biggest part of it. That's where many of the people gathered. And you can see they've got little theater areas. But it's crazy. And then we have the Acropolis and the Parthenon. The architects were sorry, the architects were Iktinos and Kallikrates and Mnesocles. So let's look at the pronunciations of these. It's difficult because it's Greek, but then it's also going into English, so it's a little hard. And then we have some of the sculptures here. In the four main monuments, we have the Parthenon, the Propylaea, and the Temple of Athena Nike, and the Erechtheion. And I will go on to those in the next slide. The Acropolis basically represents the apex of ancient Greek architectural development, and it was the biggest project by the Greeks and the most well known as well. Alright, we have the Erechtheion, the Propylaea, the Temple of Athena Nike, and the Parthenon. Next we have Greek theater. They were not just known for their pillars and columns and colonnades. We also have the theater. And Minoan civilizations were the first to bring this up. However, the Greeks soon adopted it. At first it was rectangular, made of wood, which is kind of weird to think of. However, later, obviously with the switch into stone, they also switched to theaters, and they became semicircular to allow for more people and better viewing. And we have the Dionysus Eleutherus. Yeah, Dionysus Eleutherus. This is it right here, but it's actually located, let me go back. It's actually located near the Acropolis, right next to the Acropolis. It's just never pictured because it's not as popular. And it was the Romans that took it to the grandiose level, and that's why when we think of the theater, we think of the Romans and their gladiator events. Now the importance today, we have the proportions. Everything was all proportionate. We have Fibonacci's code that came from it. We have the colonnade. We have the sculptures, the acanthus leaves, these beautiful sculptures on the Athena Nike. We have the three orders right here. And then the religious advancement, worshipping Athena and other Greek gods. It's all still seen today. We use the three orders, we use sculpture, we use the colonnade, and actually, something really interesting, these are all pictures of places still standing today. And if you can recognize a few of them, that's pretty cool. And I'll let you look at this a little bit. We've got the Supreme Court building. They use the columns, the British Museum, the columns, the Lansing Capitol, the columns again. Like, we see columns everywhere. And it's not just in Michigan, obviously, not just in the US. We've got the British Museum, the Buenos Aires Metropolitan Cathedral, the Lincoln Memorial, and then somewhere more local, to me at least, we've got the Frederick Meyer Garden Theater. And let me go back. It's got the same semicircular shape, the stone, and this was added by the Romans, but still it's got that base idea. We got the columns, and this is the acanthus leaves. Once again, acanthus leaves. This is the Ionic order, the Doric order. Can't tell over here, but it's still seen today, and we use it all the time in architecture. We use the same illusions in the building as well. And up here, you've got the sculptures, the sculpting. Same with over here, the same religious worshipping. Yeah, and as they say in Greek, Epharisto, that means thank you. Hope you enjoyed the video. Here's my works cited, and I can't wait to watch your guys's.